All right. So today I'm going to be talking about the economy. And so first I'm going to talk about capitalism. So capitalism is this concept of having, a free market. Anybody can have a business. You can shop where you like. You can spend your money where you like. Businesses can do business with whoever they like. It's great. But somewhere along the lines in the time that the United States has existed, we've managed to go away from a free market to now a predominantly preferred market. And this all goes to billion-dollar ad revenue. This is brand recognition, partnership monopolization. So, maybe you don't have Disney owning, let's say, I can't think of something off the top of my head, but say Disney doesn't own Sony outright, right? So they don't own Sony outright, but they have a extensive business relationship with Sony, which could almost act as an extension of the monopolization in which Disney has created. And so it creates like almost a preferred market type system. And this is just an example, but essentially is when the market is so much monopolized, people tend to only go to the brands they recognize and trust, and therefore it never gives the opportunity for smaller businesses to really get a foot in the door. How are they going to compete with ad revenue in the billions when they're a small business? And so creating some type of regulation within the free market is important. And I think that's what we lack in the current capitalist system. And I think it all goes to, like, socialists will argue that the capitalist system will always revert back to a preferred market, but I would argue that socialism will always revert back to a dictatorship. And so I think what we need to understand is this concept of a power matrix, is shifting power from one hand to the other doesn't necessarily do anything for anyone. It just keeps shifting the power, socialism, capitalism. But all you're doing is giving the leaders different avenues to control. You're not really doing anything about the power. You're not breaking down the power. You're not dividing the power. You're essentially just handing the power and placing it in a different person's hand. And so that's my problem with socialism, because historically socialism will always find its way into a dictatorship or a totalitarian type, just a one leader with no checks and balances type system. And I think that's bad, regardless if we're a democracy or not. Evidence is shown that in Russia and China, that essentially even being a democracy, they can just announce, like, and it's true if you think about it. What's gonna stop a president really from saying, hey, I'm gonna be president for life, stop me? And so it's something to think about, especially when you implement a big government system like socialism. And I think that's where a lot of the conservatives are afraid of, is overreaching government, giving the government too much power, even if it's seen as good in nature. And I get it, socialism has so much great welfare to offer, but it's like, does socialism function on the scale of the United States? And historically, I would say it doesn't. Given the USSR, it's just, we're an industrial, innovative country. So if we were to switch to a socialism aspect, I think corporations would vanish. I think a lot of the jobs would go with it. The economy would begin to free fall. It's just not a good system to implement in the type of capitalism that we have. Our capitalism is very aggressive and volatile, and so if you switch it out for something as like good intended as socialism, it might just cause an economical collapse altogether, because our society has never known nothing but industrialization and innovation. And so I think a drastic switch is not the answer either. I think we need to find a good balance of taxed welfare that makes sense. You know, things like, medicine that everybody can use, education that everybody can use, not, certain programs that are only going to benefit certain groups. I think it needs to be programs that everybody can access. And then I think it's also very important that we address the free market. You know, if we're gonna have a free market, I think it needs to be regulated. I don't think we should just have the market stand the way it is. Free doesn't always mean free. We have freedom, right, here in the United States, but we have a long list of codes and laws and writs and, case law that we're all supposed to abide by here in the United States. And I think our free market needs some good old regulation. I think these corporations lobbying their way into our politics is wrong, and I think it needs to be addressed. And that's where our capitalism is hurting us, is their lobbyist tactics. You know, all these super PACs and all of these sponsorships coming from these big corporations on behalf of politicians is wrong. It's wrong. They're literally buying their favors. And so I think that's problematic. And I think that, capitalism is viable. It's a system that exists. It's a system that's been working. I think it needs to be adjusted. Our free market needs to be regulated. And I think our corporations need to be separated from our politicians. I think socialism has a lot of good things to offer, but I don't think embodying socialism as a whole works for a country on the scale of the United States. There's a couple of reasons really quickly. One, it'll be met with a lot of resistance. Two, there's just our society is so large that there is going to be a portion of the population that does nothing and collects welfare. Three, we will lack innovation and industrialization, so corporations will flee to other countries and we'll lose our economic luster. So therefore, like, our global dollar will collapse. And four, I just think that historically it just doesn't work. Look at Venezuela, look at Cuba, look at USSR, look at struggling North Korea. China has to dabble in capitalism just to survive. So therefore, I rest my case. I think capitalism 2.0, neo-cap, whatever, it needs to be humanized capitalism. Something needs to happen, but the current system doesn't work, and I don't think radical socialism is going to work either. So I think we need to find a common ground and be realistic. I love people who critically think and talk about Marxism as if, the system could be changed overnight, but in reality, it will be met with strong resistance because, America is conservative. 50% of America is conservative, me being a minority, I can speak for, a portion of the Latinx community. They are, relatively conservative. And that's just my own people's. Imagine I can see, Trump's base being relatively conservative. So I think too much change is never the answer. So thank you.